The room is already occupied when we arrive, not in the way rooms usually are, with voices or movement, but with readiness, with intention, with something that has already begun. A recorder is running. Its small red light is on. No one mentions it. The hum is faint, electrical, consistent. It does not rise or fall with breath. It does not react to nerves. Two chairs face each other across a narrow table. They are closer than necessary, too close for strangers. One chair is shifted back an inch, then forward again, wood scraping softly against tile. The sound is not acknowledged. Paper is placed on the table, one sheet, then another. They are aligned carefully, too carefully. A pen is set down on top. It rolls slightly. Someone steadies it. No one writes. Breathing is audible, controlled, measured, not panicked, not calm either. There are two different rhythms. They do not match. Someone clears their throat, not to speak, just to remind themselves they can. A question has already been asked. We did not hear it. We arrive in the space after it. The interviewer sits still, hands folded, eyes lowered to the paper but not reading. This is someone practiced in waiting, someone who understands that rushing can close doors. Across the table, the other chair does not move. The person there is present, their breathing confirms it, but they do not answer. At first, the silence is ordinary, the kind that follows difficult questions, the kind people use to search themselves. The interviewer allows it. 5 seconds pass, then 10. The recorder continues to hum, faithful, indifferent. The air in the room feels denser now, not heavy, just occupied. The interviewer shifts their weight slightly. The chair creaks. Still, no interruption. This is not yet unusual. Some answers take time. Some truths resist language. But the pause stretches. It goes beyond politeness, beyond patience. It becomes something else. The interviewer glances up, not sharply, not accusingly, just checking that the person is still there. They are. Their eyes are open, fixed somewhere past the table, past the wall. They are not looking at the interviewer. Their breathing has slowed, not with calm, with withdrawal. Another moment passes, then another. The silence is no longer waiting to be filled. It is settled.
The interviewer could speak now. They're trained to. A prompt, a reassurance, a rephrasing. They choose not to. This choice is important, even if no one in the room realizes it yet. The silence is allowed to stand. It stretches long enough to become noticeable, long enough that both people are aware of it. And still, no one names it. There is something fragile about this moment, like interrupting it would break more than just procedure. The recorder keeps running. Minutes are not measured here, only breath, only the faint electrical sound. The interviewer's pen remains untouched. The paper stays blank. The room does not change, but something inside it has shifted. The silence has stopped being absence. It has become a presence of its own, not empty, not neutral, heavy with something unsaid. Eventually, the interviewer inhales as if to speak, stops. They exhale slowly. They glance once more at the person across from them, not with expectation now, with recognition. This is not refusal. This is not confusion. This is something else. The question will not be answered. Not here, not now, perhaps not ever. The interviewer makes a decision, a small one, a procedural one. They reach forward and adjust the recorder. not to stop it, just to ensure it is still capturing. The hum continues. No comment is made for the silence that came before. No note is taken explaining it. The moment is allowed to exist without interpretation. Eventually, the session ends, not abruptly, not dramatically. Chairs move back, paper is gathered, the pen is capped. Still, no answer is given. Later, much later, this interview will be summarized. Reduced, compressed, rendered manageable. A form is filled out, a time code is entered. There is a line where dialogue should be. It remains blank, not crossed out, not annotated, just empty. Beside it, a brief administrative note appears, neutral, unemotional. Response not recorded. It does not explain why. There is no official transcript of the silence, no official acknowledgement that it occurred at all. Only the running time tells the truth. Minutes logged, sound present, words absent. The tape is archived. The room is returned to use. The chairs are placed back where they started. The paper is filed elsewhere. The silence remains, preserved indirectly. Waiting. The file is opened. No explanation yet.
The file is not introduced as a story. It is introduced as an object, a rectangular archive box, standard issue, off-white once, now dulled by years of handling. The label on the spine reads File 009, black ink, block letters, no flourish. Below it, an official case title is typed, long, carefully worded, designed to explain without revealing. It is the kind of title written to satisfy procedure, not curiosity. Inside the department, the file is called something else, a shorthand, never written down, spoken only when doors are closed. The kind of name that forms when people grow tired of pretending a case makes sense. That name does not appear anywhere in the archive. Only the official title remains. The box shows signs of revision, old adhesive where a previous label was peeled away, a second sticker placed slightly crooked, a red stamp partially overlapping the original classification mark. The stamp reads, Reclassified. No date, no initials, just the word. The corners of the box are soft, rounded from being slid in and out of shelves. Not frequently, but often enough. This is not a forgotten file. It has been handled, considered, returned. Inside, the documents are arranged carefully, too carefully for something unresolved. An inventory sheet sits on top. Typed. Revised. Typed again. Item 1. Interview recording. Status. Completed. Item 2. Transcript. Status. Pending. The word pending is crossed out. Above it, written by hand, is the replacement. Pencil. Light pressure. Unavailable. No explanation follows. There is space for one. It is left blank. The handwriting does not match the signature at the bottom of the page, which suggests someone else returned to this line later. The interview log confirms what we already know. Date, time, location, room number included, recorder serial number noted, duration logged down to the second, everything accounted for, except the words. The transcript section is neat, too neat. No redactions, no black bars, just empty pages where dialogue should be. They were formatted, numbered, prepared, then abandoned. A later memo attempts to address the absence. Not directly, never directly. It states that the recording was reviewed, that no usable verbal response was obtained. The phrasing is careful, defensive. It avoids assigning fault. It avoids stating whether the silence was technical or human. There is no recommendation to re-interview, no suggestion of follow-up. That omission matters. In most cases, silence triggers urgency, escalation, concern. Here, it triggers discomfort. The margins of the memo are narrow, crowded, as if whoever wrote it was trying to contain the subject.
There are initials at the bottom, then another set beside them, then a third added later. Different pens, different pressures. The file moved. Not forward, sideways. From desk to desk, from department to department. Each transfer logged, each reason vague. Further review required. Administrative clarification. Internal assessment. None of them specify what needs clarifying, or why. There is a moment midway through the file where the tone shifts. The language becomes flatter, shorter, as if enthusiasm has drained out of the process. The case is no longer being investigated, it is being managed. A cover note suggests sealing the file temporarily, not because it is complete, but because it is inactive. Inactive is not the same as resolved. Inactive simply means no one wants to touch it right now. There is no dissent recorded, no objection, just a quiet agreement. The seal is applied, a thin strip of tape, a date stamp. The file is shelved. Not deep storage, accessible, but avoided. The final page in the box is a routing slip. It lists names, departments, dates. Some names are crossed out, some are circled. One is underlined twice. There is no note explaining why, only a faint impression where someone pressed too hard with a pen. The file ends without a conclusion. No summary, no findings, no statement of outcome. Just a status line. Sealed. No further action at this time. At this time remains undefined. The box is closed. The lid fits snugly, as if designed to keep something in or out. On the shelf, file 009 sits between cases that reached answers, confessions, findings, determinations. It does not belong among them, but it remains there anyway. Quiet, complete in form only. The discomfort it caused has been smoothed over with procedure, stamped, filed, stored. No urgency remains, only avoidance. The file is no longer asking a question, but it is not providing an answer either. File 009 stays sealed, waiting.
At the time, there was nothing unusual about the city. That detail matters because nothing here begins with chaos. The streets followed predictable routes. Buses arrived within minutes of their schedules. Offices opened when they were supposed to. Lights turned off when they were meant to. People trusted systems because the systems usually worked. This was a place built on routine. Not optimism, not fear, routine. The institution handling File 009 had existed for decades. Its corridors smelled faintly of paper and cleaning solution. The walls were lined with notices reminding staff to log everything. Nothing was considered real until it was recorded. Interviews were not dramatic events. They were scheduled, prepared for, documented. A recorder on the table meant order. A transcript meant closure. This was not a culture that relied on memory. Memory was considered unreliable, too human. What mattered was what could be typed, stamped, and filed. Tape recorders were everywhere, small, functional, unremarkable. They sat on desks like staplers or lamps. No one listened closely to the hum anymore. It was the sound of work being done. Once an interview ended, the tape followed a familiar path. Logged, labeled, delivered. A clerk signed it in. A typist received it later. Usually the same day, sometimes the next. Headphones on, fingers ready. This was quiet labor, invisible labor, the kind that rarely appears in reports. Typists were not investigators. They did not ask questions. They listened. They transformed voices into text, laughter into punctuation, pauses into ellipses, silence into timestamps. Everything spoken was expected to survive in words. That expectation was never questioned. Records were trusted because they were consistent. If something happened, it left a trace. If it left a trace, it could be followed. And if it could be followed, it could be resolved. This belief shaped how people behaved. Interviewers asked questions with confidence because even if the answer was difficult, it would be captured. Administrators approved procedures without hesitation because documentation meant accountability. The system did not imagine gaps, it imagined delays. Missing paperwork could be located. Unreadable audio could be replayed. Nothing important was expected to disappear. The city itself reflected this mindset. Buildings were maintained, archives expanded methodically. Old records were boxed, labeled, and stored. New ones replaced them without ceremony. There was comfort in that continuity. People slept knowing tomorrow would resemble today. Even tragedy followed patterns. Accidents were logged, deaths recorded, explanations pursued. Loss was acknowledged through paperwork. Grief became a file number. This was considered progress. Against this backdrop, the interview in File 009 did not stand out. At least, not at first. It was scheduled like any other. Room reserved, equipment checked, forms prepared. No special instructions appear in the early notes. No warnings. No indication that anything unusual was expected. The people involved trusted the process. They had every reason to. Nothing in their training suggested a moment could resist transcription. Silence was just another thing to record. A pause, a hesitation.
Even refusal had language. I don't know. I can't say. These phrases existed for a reason. They filled space. They closed gaps. The idea that a response might never arrive was not considered, because responses always arrived, eventually. The typists trusted this too. They did not question blank tape time codes. They assumed sound would come. If it didn't, they flagged it as technical. Machines failed. People did not vanish from recordings. Administrators believed in redundancy. If one copy failed, another existed. If one record was unclear, a second clarified it. Confidence was built into the structure. So when the transcript for File 009 did not materialize, it caused confusion, not alarm. Confusion. It did not match the system's understanding of itself. A delay was expected. An omission was not. Early notes treated as a temporary problem, a matter of workflow. Someone assumed the typist was behind. Someone else assumed the tape had been misplaced. No one assumed the silence was intentional, because intention implied meaning, and meaning implied responsibility. The institution was not built to handle that kind of absence. Its strength was in handling what could be seen, counted, filed. It managed presence well, absence less so. The city continued as usual, while File 009 waited. Traffic reports aired on the radio, office lights flicked on each morning, other interviews were conducted, transcribed, closed. They followed the expected arc: question, answer, resolution. File 009 did not, but in a place that trusted routine, anomalies were softened, rounded down, explained away. The assumption remained that nothing important could simply vanish. If it had not appeared yet, it would. Eventually. That confidence delayed recognition. It allowed the silence to sit unchallenged, not because anyone wanted it there, but because no one knew how to address it. The system had no language for a moment that refused to become text. So, it waited. And the city, orderly and unremarkable, waited with it, unaware that something had already slipped beyond record.
The first sign of trouble is easy to miss. It does not announce itself. It arrives as a delay. The transcription log shows a gap. Not an absence, just time passing without resolution. The tape is marked as received. The typist's name is listed. The expected completion date comes and goes. No alarm is raised. Delays happen. Work piles up. Someone assumes it'll be finished tomorrow. A small handwritten note appears in the margin. Tape unclear. Nothing else. No description of the problem. No mention of static or damage. Just that word, unclear. It is an unusual choice. Most technical issues have names: dropout, distortion, channel failure. Unclear suggests uncertainty rather than malfunction. A supervisor initials the note, not approval, acknowledgement. A follow-up request is generated automatically. Standard wording, neutral tone. It asks for clarification. It asks whether the tape can be reprocessed. It is sent. No response is logged. Days pass. The request remains open. A second note appears, shorter, less formal. Pending review. No name attached. The language around the interview begins to change. In internal conversations, it is no longer discussed directly. People refer to it sideways. That one. The earlier interview. File 009. Voice is lower when it is mentioned. Not out of fear, out of caution. No one wants to be the person who mishandles it, because no one understands it. Responsibility starts to blur. Was it a technical issue? A procedural error? A human decision? Each possibility points to someone, and no one volunteers to stand there. Instead, small adjustments are made. The tape is moved to a different queue. Not escalation, deferral. A new status code is applied, one that allows more time without explanation. The code is rarely used, mostly for damaged media, but no damage is noted here. The workaround functions as silence made official. A manager asks about the transcript during a routine meeting. The question is answered vaguely. It's being looked at. The manager nods. They do not ask who is looking, or what they are looking for. Another week passes. The follow-up request expires. The system marks it as unresolved. Nothing happens. No escalation is triggered. The lack of response becomes part of the record. An absence layered on top of another absence. Staff members who were not present at the interview begin to sense it anyway. Not from the tape, from how others behave around it, from pauses in conversation, from the way eyes move to the floor when the file is mentioned. There is discomfort here. Not panic, discomfort. The kind that comes from a problem that refuses to define itself. One clerk attempts to log the interview as non-responsive. The entry is rejected by the system. That category requires a recorded refusal. Words are required to prove silence. They are not available. So the clerk selects See Attached. There is nothing attached. The system accepts it anyway. This is how the workarounds begin. Not to hide the problem, to move past it. The interview stops being something to be transcribed. It becomes something referenced, a line item without content. Later memos mention it in passing, as discussed in File 009, as noted previously. No one quotes it, no one summarizes it, because there is nothing to quote, and nothing anyone agrees on. The tape itself remains stored, logged, cataloged. But no one signs it out. It's easier to refer to the idea of it. Safer. The people involved begin to separate the event from its record. They speak as if the interview happened, because it did, but they behave as if it left nothing behind, because it seems to have. This contradiction settles quietly into routine. No meeting is called to resolve it. No directive is issued. The institution adapts. It learns how to function around the gap. Each workaround adds distance. Each vague note smooths over discomfort. The cracks are small, hairline fractures in an otherwise solid structure, but they are there, and once noticed, they cannot be unseen. The interview is no longer a moment in time. It is a reference point, a thing gestured toward, never opened, never explained. It exists in conversation, but not in paper. In memory, but not in text. The system continues to function, but now, quietly, it does so with a blind spot. The first crack is formed.
The day begins without distinction. Morning light filters through low cloud. Nothing in the weather suggests consequence. The building opens at its usual time. Lights hum on. Doors unlock. The first arrival is logged at 8:41 a.m. Security initials the sheet. The interview subject arrives 12 minutes later, 8:53. They sign in with a steady hand. No hesitation noted. No remarks made. A clerk later recalls nothing unusual. Just another name, another time. The interviewer arrives last, 9:02 a.m. Coffee in one hand, folder in the other. The folder is thin. That is remembered clearly. They greet each other briefly in the corridor. No witnesses recall the words exchanged, only that they spoke. The interview room is unlocked at 9:06. Room C12. Standard size, no windows. 2 chairs, 1 table. A wall clock that runs slightly fast. This will matter later. The recorder is placed on the table at 9:08. Serial number matches the log. The tape is new, still sealed when opened. A brief test is conducted. A voice speaks the date, the room number, both names. The playback is checked. Clear. The recorder is reset. This is all routine. The interview officially begins at 9:12. This time appears in 3 places: the recorder log, the room schedule, the interviewer's notes. The first question is not preserved, but its position is inferred. A note in the margin reads, "Background." Another reads, "Confirm timeline." These are typical openings, grounding questions. The subject is expected to answer them easily. The recorder runs. The clock ticks. At 9:18, a note is made. 1 word. Pause. Underlined once. This is not unusual.
Interviewers often mark hesitation. At 9:21, another note. Time clarification. This suggests a follow-up question, something imprecise, still routine. At 9:24, the notes stop reflecting dialogue. From this point on, they become descriptive, not of what was said, but of how the room felt. Long pause, written in smaller letters, as if not meant to stand out. The recorder continues to run. At 9:27, the interviewer writes nothing, but the time code advances. Later analysis shows sound present, breathing, movement, no speech. At 9:31, a new line appears. Asked again. No quotation marks, no paraphrase, just the attempt. What follows is unclear. The notes show a bracket drawn in the margin. It spans several lines. This is sometimes used to group related exchanges. Here, there is nothing to group, only time passing. From 9:31 to 9:44, the recorder captures something. The tape confirms it was not silence in the technical sense. There is sound, shifting, a breath drawn in and held, a chair leg scraping once, but no words. At 9:45, the interviewer writes, "Subject present." This line is pressed harder into the paper than the others,
as if reassurance was needed. The next timestamp is 9:52. 7 minutes unaccounted for in the notes. They exist on the tape. They exist in the log, but not in description. No interruption is recorded. No knock at the door. No technical failure. At 9:53, a new pen is used. The ink is darker. The handwriting slightly less controlled. Proceeding. It is unclear what this means. Proceeding with what? Or from where? The next inferred question appears at 9:55, based on a single word: location. This suggests an attempt to return to facts, anchors, the kind of questions designed to pull someone back. The tape does not confirm success. At 10:01, the wall clock reaches the hour. The recorder shows 10:03. The difference is noted later. 2 minutes. Small, but important. At 10:05, the interviewer clears their throat. This sound is distinct on the tape, followed by a sentence fragment. Only the beginning is audible. Then it stops, as if abandoned mid-thought. From 10:06 to 10:14, there are no notes at all. This is the longest stretch, 8 minutes. The tape continues uninterrupted. Later listeners describe it differently. One says it felt heavy. Another says it felt deliberate. A third refuses to describe it at all. At 10:15, the interviewer writes, "Ending session." No reason given, no justification, just the decision. The recorder is stopped at 10:17. This time appears cleanly in the log. The tape counter matches. The interview ends without incident on paper. Chairs move. The door opens. Both parties exit separately. A staff member in the hallway recalls nothing unusual. No raised voices, no visible distress. The interviewer returns the recorder at 10:22, signs it in, makes no comment. The subject signs out at 10:24. Their handwriting matches the morning entry. Steady, unchanged.
Later recollections conflict. One person recalls the interviewer looking pale. Another insists they seemed normal. One remembers the subject avoiding eye contact. Another says nothing stood out. No formal complaint is filed. No report of misconduct. No request for medical attention. On paper, the day concludes cleanly. But the minutes do not add up. There are stretches of time that exist only as duration, not as action, not as speech. They sit on the tape without explanation, too long to ignore, too quiet to summarize. The official record moves on. Lunch breaks are logged, other interviews begin. The building returns to rhythm. But something from that room does not transition with the rest of the day. It remains fixed, minute by minute, unaccounted for, still waiting to be described.
Nothing breaks loudly at first. That is important to understand, because what failed here did not shatter. It softened. It slipped. Transcription was never automatic. Despite how it was spoken about, despite how dependable it seemed, a human always sat between the tape and the page. A person with headphones, a person with a desk lamp and a keyboard, a person expected to disappear behind the words they produced. The typist assigned to file 009 had done this work for years. Their name appears on hundreds of records. Routine interviews, routine statements, routine confessions. Nothing about their history suggests error. Nothing suggests defiance. They were known for accuracy, for patience, for finishing on time. The tape was delivered as usual, signed in, placed in the queue. No warning attached, no note from the interviewer, just another cassette among many. The typist begins listening. This moment is not logged. It never is. The system assumes compliance, that the work simply happens. But something does happen here, not mechanically, humanly. At first, there is nothing to type. That in itself is not a problem. Pauses are common. Hesitation is expected. The typist waits, listens, marks the time code. Still nothing. They wait longer than usual. Long enough to notice the waiting, long enough to remove one hand from the keyboard, to adjust the headphones, to lean closer. The sound is there. This is clear later. Breathing, movement, the room existing, but no words arrive. At some point, the typist realizes this is not a technical issue, not static, not dropout. The machine is functioning. It is faithfully recording something that refuses to become text. This is where routine fails, because there is no procedure for this. The typist cannot invent dialogue, cannot summarize silence without instruction, cannot leave the page blank without explanation. They stop the tape, rewind, listen again. Nothing changes. They advance further, then back, looking for a place where speech resumes. It does not. Minutes pass this way, then more. This is when discomfort sets in. Not fear, recognition. The understanding that something has been asked of them that they cannot complete. They make a note. Tape unclear. It is deliberately vague, a shield. It buys time. It avoids explanation. The typist does not escalate immediately, not because they are hiding anything, but because escalation requires articulation, and articulation is exactly what is missing. They try again later, different day, different mood, same result. The silence feels heavier now, not longer, just harder to sit with. It resists conversion, it resists framing. At some point, the typist stops the tape and removes the headphones. That moment is not recorded either. But its effects are. From here, the process changes. Supervisors are informed in fragments. Careful language. Unclear audio. Difficulty isolating speech. No one asks to listen immediately. This is subtle, but meaningful. In other cases, supervisors intervene quickly. They verify. They confirm. Here, they accept the summary, because listening would mean sharing responsibility, and responsibility would require decision. The tape becomes a problem without an owner. The typist is no longer expected to resolve it, but no one else claims it either. Time passes. The tape remains where it is, logged, untranscribed, occasionally referenced, never confronted. Institutional preference begins to show itself, not as policy, as habit. Omission is easier than explanation. A missing transcript can be labeled, explained away. A silence that demands interpretation cannot. So it is left alone. This choice is not dramatic. No meeting is called to suppress anything. No order is given to bury the tape. People simply stop asking, because asking would force an answer, and no one has one. The typist eventually moves on. Other tapes, other voices, but this one lingers, in memory, if not in writing. Years later, when asked, they struggle to describe why they stopped. They say it was hard to listen to. Not loud, not disturbing in the usual sense, just hard. As if the tape demanded something they could not give. This is not documented in the file. It survives only as recollection. The human cost of this failure is not counted. No one logs the weight carried by the person who first encountered it. The frustration, the doubt, the quiet sense of having failed a voice. Because a voice existed, even without words. Something was present on that tape. Something that occupied time, occupied air, occupied a room. And by leaving it undocumented, the institution chose absence over uncertainty, chose silence over struggle. This decision protected the system, but it cost the record. A moment that could not be written down was allowed to fade. Not erased, just unsupported. The tape remained, but without text, it lost its authority. Without transcription, it could not speak for itself. It became easier to treat it as a malfunction than a message. This is what went wrong. Not a single failure, but a series of small refusals. To listen fully, to decide, to name what could not be named. In the end, no one destroyed the voice. They simply left it behind. And in doing so, they ensured it would never be heard the way it needed to be. Not because it said nothing, but because no one could bring themselves to write it down.
There is no official section in the file labeled theory, no appendix where possibilities are laid out neatly. What follows exists only in the margins. It is built from absences, from crossed-out lines, from questions written in pencil, then erased. Every attempt to explain what happened creates a new gap, Every explanation solves one problem and opens another. That is where we begin. Theory 1. Technical failure, inadequately documented. The most acceptable explanation is also the simplest. A machine failed. A recorder malfunctioned. Devices from that period were unreliable, batteries degraded, magnetic heads misaligned. Static could erase minutes without warning. Tape could stretch, fold, or snap invisibly. This is all documented elsewhere, but in this file, no failure is recorded, no maintenance report, no incident log. The equipment inventory lists the recorder as functional. The checkout form shows it was returned. There is no note of damage. If the machine failed, someone noticed. Someone would have heard it. Someone would have said something. Instead, the paperwork remains calm, routine, uninterested. A technical failure explains the silence. It does not explain the lack of reaction to it. Supporting evidence. There is a faint notation beside the timecode gap, a smudge where a word may have been written. It cannot be recovered. The tape box shows signs of being reopened, adhesive weakened, seal pressed back into place. These are small things. They suggest handling, they suggest review, but they do not explain why nothing followed. No retest, no follow-up interview. A machine can fail once. Institutions rarely ignore it completely. Missing corroboration. No technician was called, no replacement tape issued, no follow-up interview scheduled. The silence stands alone, unconfirmed, unchallenged. For a technical error, it was treated with remarkable indifference, as if everyone agreed not to look too closely. Theory 2. Content deemed unrecordable informally. There is another possibility, less official, more human. Something was said that could not be processed, not illegal, not forbidden, simply unsuitable for the form, for the record. Institutions do not always censor formally. Sometimes they hesitate. Sometimes they quietly decide. The interview continued on paper. Questions were asked. Answers were summarized. But the middle portion, the part without transcription, may have resisted summary, not because it was dramatic, but because it was wrong for the space it occupied. Too emotional, too personal, too uncertain. This theory suggests discomfort rather than malice, a choice made without discussion, without permission. Behavioral clues. The interviewer's later notes are clipped, shorter than before, less descriptive. Words like clarified and addressed appear without context. They replace explanation. They smooth over texture. The subject's demeanor is marked as calm, the same word used earlier, repeated without elaboration. Repetition can be a sign of avoidance, a way of stopping thinking. Lack of formal censorship trail. No memo exists ordering omission, no stamp of restriction, no classification upgrade. Everything remains ordinary, which makes the absence more conspicuous. If content was suppressed, it was done quietly, person to person, without witnesses. Theory 3. Human refusal. A choice not to transcribe. This theory centers on one person, not a system, not a machine. The transcriber, the individual tasked with listening, with converting sound into text. They worked alone, at a desk, with headphones. Their name appears once, then never again in the file. Transcription is intimate work. You hear breath. You hear hesitation. You sit inside someone else's voice, minute by minute, word by word. At some point, the process stopped, not abruptly, quietly. No report of refusal exists, no complaint, no request for reassignment. The transcript simply ends.
Subtle resistance indicators. The formatting changes near the gap. Margins widen. Line spacing increases. These are unconscious decisions. They slow the page. They create distance. After the gap, the tone is flatter, less attentive, as if written by someone already elsewhere. Resistance does not always announce itself. Sometimes it just withdraws. Absence of disciplinary action. If refusal occurred, it was not punished. No reprimand, no notation in personnel records. This suggests quiet consent, or quiet relief, or quiet denial. Everyone may have decided it was easier not to ask. Theory 4. The interview said nothing, and that was the problem. The most unsettling possibility is also the most fragile, that nothing happened, that nothing was said. Not a malfunction, not suppression, not refusal. Just silence, recorded faithfully, then misunderstood. Minutes of tape with no speech, no questions, no answers. Silence that stretched beyond expectation, beyond protocol, beyond comfort. Records are built to capture events. They struggle with non-events, with absence. A recorder running with nothing to record creates confusion, creates uncertainty. Was the silence intentional? Was it emotional? Was it shared? Paper has no way to encode that, so it was skipped. Silence as content. Silence can be meaningful, but institutions rarely treat it as such. It cannot be summarized, it cannot be quoted, it cannot be archived easily. So it becomes a problem, one best solved by omission. Records unable to encode absence. The file accommodates facts, times, names. It does not know what to do with nothing, so nothing disappears. What remains is the outline of a moment that should exist, but doesn't. No theory resolved. Each explanation fits part of the evidence, none fits all of it. A machine failure without response, a decision without record, a refusal without consequence, a silence without language. They overlap, they contradict, they leave space. Each explanation leaves gaps. The gaps remain the most consistent feature. They appear no matter which theory you choose. They suggest that something occurred that resisted capture from every angle, not because it was hidden, but because it was incompatible with process, with format, with expectation. The file does not ask you to decide. It does not guide you toward a conclusion. It simply presents what remains and what does not. And it leaves you in the same position as everyone else who encountered this silence before. Listening, waiting, with nothing arriving.
Nothing dramatic followed the interview. No hearings, no internal review. The building did not empty suddenly. Lights were not left on overnight. The corridor returned to its routine silence. Those connected to the interview did not vanish. They continued. They adjusted. The interviewer remained in their position for several months, long enough for the event to lose immediacy, long enough for questions to feel impolite. Their later reports are competent, orderly, unremarkable. There is no visible decline in performance, only a narrowing of detail, fewer adjectives. Eventually, they requested reassignment, not immediately, not urgently. The request cites workload, scheduling,
Nothing personal. It was approved without comment. No farewell note was added to the file. The transcriber left sooner, quietly, mid-cycle. Their departure form lists personal reasons, a phrase that closes conversation, a phrase no one questions. There is no replacement credit on the transcript, no continuation. The gap remains untouched. Supervisors rotated as they always do, temporary appointments, acting titles. Each one inherited the same incomplete file. Each one signed off on its existence. None altered its status. The tape itself was logged and shelved, boxed in neutral cardboard, labeled in block letters. At first, it was considered evidence, then reference, then material of uncertain value. Magnetic tape does not wait patiently. It stretches. It decays. By the time anyone returned to it deliberately, the audio was already compromised. High frequencies thinned, sections warped into softness, voices dulled, silence spread. The missing minutes could not be recovered, not because they were erased deliberately, but because time finished what omission began. No certification of loss was issued. The tape was never declared destroyed. It simply became unverified. Unverified material is difficult to discard and easy to ignore. The file itself aged slowly. Paper yellowed, ink softened. Staples rusted, margins filled with new numbering systems, old references crossed out, then restored. Despite everything, its status never changed. Not closed, not resolved. Officially, it remains open, an active file with no next step. Years later, new archivists encountered it. They always did. It resisted disappearance. Usually late at night, during audits, during backlog reviews. They paused at the same place, the same blank space, the same time codes without words. Some checked adjacent boxes, looking for a misfiled page, a loose insert. Others requested the tape, put on headphones, listened carefully. What they heard depended on the condition of the equipment, on the day, on their expectations. Mostly they heard room tone, air, faint movement. Sometimes they thought they heard breath or a shift in posture, nothing more. No one ever documented hearing speech. No one documented hearing nothing. They wrote notes like "no recoverable content" or simply left the line blank. The register still lists the interview, date, time, participants. Under transcription status, there is a space, not marked incomplete, not marked missing, just empty. That empty line has outlasted several classification systems, several reorganizations, several philosophies of record-keeping. It has been recopied faithfully each time, as if absence itself were data. The room where the interview occurred was repurposed, painted, renumbered, furniture replaced, carpet changed, the walls forgot. But the silence did not remain there. It traveled with the file. It appeared wherever the file was opened, on desks, on screens. Archivists describe the same sensation, a slowing, a hesitation, as if something were expected of them, as if the file were waiting. Some attempted to close it, to declare it inactive, procedurally resolved. Each time the request stalled, returned with comments, deferred. No one ever formally denied closure. It simply never happened. The interview remains unheard, not hidden, not locked away, just inaccessible. not because it is forbidden, but because there is nothing left to access. And yet, the sense persists that something was there once, something that required attention, that demanded witness. The register does not express regret, but people do. They describe a feeling of having failed a voice, of letting a moment pass unheld. Records are meant to preserve, to prevent disappearance. This one documents its own inability to do so. That may be why it remains active, why it cannot be concluded. Closing the file would imply understanding or acceptance. Neither exists. So the file waits, unfinished, available. It does not ask to be solved, only to be acknowledged. That something occurred and was not carried forward, that a voice entered a room and did not leave with the record. The silence continues long after the people involved moved on, long after the tape degraded, long after the room changed. It continues each time the file is opened, each time the blank line is seen. A quiet reminder that not everything meant to be heard is preserved. The register remains open. The interview remains unheard. The file is still active.